Hello, and welcome along to our Viite discussion panel. This is about 2025 county and municipal elections of the Science and Technology Greens, or Viite, as it often is called. Viite organizes discussions before the elections where the focus is on knowledge-based decision-making and the role of science and technology in counties and municipalities. My name is Marjaana Mäkinen. I'm the chair of the Science and Technology Greens in Southwest Finland and also a candidate in the municipal elections in Turku and the county elections in Southwest Finland. This evening, I will be a host as we talk about the ongoing elections and what are the most important issues at the municipal and county level right now. I have three great candidates from the Greens with me. Kelvin Jackson, also from Turku and Varsinaissuomi. Owain Hopeaketo from Espoo. And then Nina Miettinen from Helsinki. County and municipal level decision makers shape the services that touch our everyday lives: healthcare, schools, public transport, culture, sports, equal access to support. The elections matter whether you are a student, a working professional, a parent, and perhaps someone not yet fluent in Finnish. And that may be quite a large part of the population, as in Espoo, more than 23% of the residents do not have Finnish, Swedish, or Sami as their native language. While in Helsinki, it's almost 20% and almost 40% in the residents of Turku. That is why it's important to talk about the elections and the problems we are facing in our counties and municipalities, also in English. So before we start, I want to remind our audience that we are here for you. You can take part of the discussion by posting comments and questions to the chat box. And now, let's start with introductions. First, Minna, tell us about yourself and briefly about your election teams.
Hello, so I'm Nina Miettinen from Helsinki, current vice chair of the Green Group in the City Council, and also a member in the Culture and Leisure Committee. I'm a geographer and I work as a coordinator in Scouts, which is the biggest youth organization in Finland. I'm a mother of 1-year-old twin girls and running for my third municipal elections. So my themes in these elections are to build hope for the future and having a sustainable lifestyle in a global city that I want Helsinki to be. And thirdly, I would love that Helsinki is a city that fits to nature's limits. So with these themes, I'm ready to answer all your questions tonight.
Thank you. And then Owen, tell us about yourself and briefly about your themes.
Hey, so Owain Hopeaketo. I moved from the UK to Finland in 2016 to study chemical engineering at Aalto University. Now I'm working at the trade union Tech in public affairs and advocacy for our international members, so international technology experts all across Finland. This is my first time running as a candidate in Espoo, or as a candidate. And I started running because from my work and from being an immigrant myself, I saw how damaging the government rhetoric, the government policies are to our immigrant population, especially in terms of, as Nina already mentioned, hope. So I wanted to run to help represent some maybe of that hope. So my themes all relate to cities responding to the government. So internationality, to fight the negative rhetoric; employment, to fight, for example, the free 6-month rule and the impacts that having; and students, to fight the student cuts.
Thank you. And then Kelvin, tell us about yourself and your campaign themes.
Yeah, so I am Kelvin Jackson. I am a non-binary immigrant from the United States of America. I also moved to Finland in 2016 to study relic linguistics at the University of Turku. Also think about what else happened in the US in 2016. That's not the reason I moved, but it certainly helps to not be there. I got my master's in relic linguistics and then have been working as a programmer for the last few years in Turku. In terms of my election themes, increasingly, one of the biggest themes is don't let Finland become like America. I like to keep repeating that I'm from the United States, and so I have a good sense of what not to do to a health system. That's probably my core theme at the county level, because healthcare is one of the main things that the counties deal with. But I also am looking to improve our digital services and make sure that we take care of the needs of immigrants and queer people.
Thank you. So, what are the most important issues in your municipality or county right now? And if we start with Owen.
Well, so I think there's maybe two. It's obviously there's a list that would last an hour, but especially two that I'd like to focus on. So I already mentioned employment, and I think everyone knows that employment is one of the big worries, the big concerns in every municipality, be it right now with the high unemployment rate. But in Espoo, for example, and every other city, are facing this trifecta of high unemployment rates, the free 6-month rule at state level that means that immigrants who are here on working permits will get kicked out in 3 or 6 months of unemployment. So that at a time when we have high unemployment, and at the same time we're completely reforming the employment integration services. So we have a problem and we have a potential solution. And that is, I think, perhaps the most important part of Espoo in the next 2 years, is how this employment reform can be handled. But I'd also want to mention that population growth is the other. So Espoo's population in the last 10 years has increased by 20%. Half of that has been non-Finnish residents, and people with neither of their parents being Finnish. So we have an increasingly diverse and an increasing population, and that means housing, that means money for services, that means everything that a growing population needs. And from that population, we'll need to decide what kind of city Espoo is. Is Espoo a city of international people and diversity?
Thanks. And then I think it's logical to move to Helsinki from Espoo, also a growing city.
Thank you. And I just want to comment on Kelvin that I was an exchange student in the US in 2008, which was when Obama was elected. So I got that hope from there to start running in politics. But issues in Helsinki, I would name 3 most important at the moment. First of all, we need to preserve more than 10% of our environment, which means we need to double our preserved space for forests and multiply at 10 the space we have preserved in the sea surface. So that's one, our goal for the next term. The other one is to be carbon neutral by 2030, and that's in 5 years. So one of our biggest issue at the moment is how we organize our traffic so we get our emissions down. And that's a question where Helsinki is always voting 50-50 in the city council. So it really matters what you vote for when it comes to traffic in these elections. And Greens would like to have more space for walking, biking, and public transportation, and also lower the prices of the public transportation. And thirdly, stopping the growing segregation in the different areas of Helsinki. And that can be done in planning housing better, also putting more money on schools and other services in those areas that currently lack those services, or in schools have more students who need more help in school. So we really need to increase that amount of money in the budget. So those 3 topics you should consider when voting in Helsinki.
Okay, so how's the situation in Turku? What do you say, Kelvin?
Yeah, so as Owen also alluded to, there are always a million different issues, and it's hard to pick a most important. But I feel like what Nina laid the groundwork for a couple of things that I would also like to mention. One of them is segregation. There is definitely a tendency for immigrants to go to Varissuo and places like that, and other parts of the city to be very white, which means that there isn't as much communication between people from different groups, and immigrant kids grow up and don't feel included, which is not a good thing. I would also mention the fact that in Turku, we're trying to be carbon neutral by 2029, the 800th anniversary of Turku. What's the thing that brings this is a very stereotypical thing to say. What's the common factor there? One of the common factors is the tram that's being planned in Turku. That will help address both of those problems by improving public transportation, allowing fewer people to need to drive cars, and also hopefully reducing segregation by making it easier to get between Varissuo and the city center, especially.
What is it, Owen?
Add one more thing, as I now realise. None of us brought it up, and it's so important to all three cities that I think it needs to be, is our students and university students at a time where they are facing very, very difficult times. It's growing inequality in who is allowed to be a university student, and a huge factor of that is about housing. So when we're all mentioning housing and sort of population growth, especially, I think we need to highlight that there needs to be student housing. There's been in Espoo recently, and I know at least in Lappeenranta, the stories of international students using food banks in these last couple of weeks. And I think that really needs to be shouted from the rooftops, that a huge factor in that is a lack of affordable housing eating up disposable budget. So we have to, I feel like it would be remiss if none of us brought up the topic of students and their struggles.
I'd also just add to that before we move on that, yes, that's definitely a big problem in Turku. I know native Finnish students who have serious troubles making their money stretch, and consider what it must be like for international students who are going to have much harder time finding a job.
In a way, that brings me to the next question, that the most influential party right now in Helsinki, Espoo, and Turku is Kokoomus. And we know that Kokoomus supporters are very eager to vote. So what would you change if we would get more people to vote for the Greens, so that the Greens would be the biggest party in your city? And we can start with Nina.
Thank you. As I already mentioned, traffic, we would have more bike lanes, more space for walking, and also lower public transportation costs, or the tickets prices. Also, what I have been realizing now that I've been sitting in the budget negotiations in Helsinki in a couple of last years, that the Greens actually would like to invest more, and Kokoomus would actually, they would like to cut our investments. And that has a really big effect on growth in the city, and also how much we are able to make energy renovations in buildings, also how many services we can build to those areas that currently lack those services. So it's a really big thing. Also, we would, of course, preserve more of our forests and parks, and have more money on schools. In every budget negotiations of this term, we've been wanting to have more money on schools, and unfortunately in the negotiations we have not been able to get that money because of Kokoomus.
What does Kelvin say? What would change in Turku?
Yeah, so I guess, again, the first obvious thing, make sure the tram happens. But something a little more involved and a little bit closer to my heart in terms of my background academically, one thing would be improving multilingual education, making sure that immigrant kids grow up bilingually in Finnish and in their mother tongue, in the sense of the language spoken by their parents. I mean, they would be native speakers of Finnish as well, but there is always room for improvement there. I mean, the ideal would be bilingualism for everybody. Of course, resources are limited, but there are, for larger immigrant groups, there's no reason it wouldn't work.
Okay, then, and what would change in Espoo, Owain?
We would have a fairer city, to summarize. We'd have a fairer city, a city that is not focusing on marginalization and segregation, but is focusing on bringing people together. Espoo is a city that is highly educated. It's almost half of Espoo's population has a tertiary education. It's higher than Helsinki, higher than Turku, higher than, I think, every other large city in Finland. And it's a city that has one of the lowest tax rates. And with growing population and the growing diversity of the population, Espoo would be a city that is willing to invest in bringing those people together. We can take the recent example of the HSL price rises. That is a increase in the cost of the lives of anyone using public transport. But Kokoomus will at the same time talk about not raising taxes. But that is doing the same thing. It's just only doing it for the people who can't afford or don't want to run a car or can't afford to buy a house that is near their job. So it would be a city that focuses on progress that is bringing people together instead of cuts, instead of driving inequality that is just forming a city that is less and less fair. I also, on a kind of wider note to all of our cities, that I think a green-led Espoo, which is maybe a pipe dream still compared to the other two cities, but a green-led any of our cities is a statement to every immigrant, to every migrant, to every non-native Finn who has felt for now years that Finnish politics is against them. And they see Kokoomus as the party that is one of the two parties, at least, that is driving this. And I think green-led and Greens taking over cities would, as well as what directly affecting the cities, it's also about the impact on the mindset that, the country did choose, at least in parts, to not vote for the party that is effectively telling me to leave this country.
Yeah, very true. Good words.
Can I just comment real quick? Thank you, Kelvin, for bringing up the language issues in schools as well. I'm actually really worried that even the Finnish students are now choosing less languages in schools at the moment. And we see we have cities that the citizens speak more and more languages all the time, but people are studying less and less languages. They are going less on exchange. So to be truly international, truly global, we need to really encourage people to study languages and all kinds of languages, not just like one of the most spoken languages in the world, but all languages. And we have the possibilities to be truly multilingual cities, I think. So there's one issue for us all to solve.
Yeah, when just limit to 2 languages, it's good to have more.
If I can jump off of that again and respond to the response to me, I said bilingual in Finnish and immigrant languages. What I really should have said is bilingual in a domestic language and an immigrant language. And a domestic language does not just mean Finnish and Swedish. It means Finnish or Swedish or Sami or Karelian or Romani. There are many languages even like natively spoken. What is even the correct term? You know what I mean. Spoken by populations who have lived in Finland for hundreds of years. That often get pushed to the side.
Yeah, very true. Let's move forward to the employment services that are now the responsibility of the municipalities. Unemployment rates are quite high. What do you think that should be done differently in the cities now that we have control over those? And let's start with Kelvin.
All right. Well, one thing that would help for immigrants specifically is encourage employers to hire people who don't speak Finnish when Finnish isn't absolutely required. This is a big problem that you hear about. Immigrants, even with very good Finnish, will apply for a job and they'll go through the whole process and they'll be told, we chose somebody else. Your Finnish wasn't good enough. Never mind that you have C2. And if you think about it, if you're going to be a baker or something like that, do you really need Finnish at all? That's a major issue that affects immigrants. Now, I speak Finnish reasonably well. A lot of people don't. That's one of the first places where I would start.
How would you then encourage these companies to hire more people because you just, how could we progress with that?
I am going to throw that to the other participants while I think about it.
Okay, very good. Sorry, that was a bit tough one. Yeah. Okay, let's continue with Owain then.
As said, I'm working for a trade union. Most of my life is spent advocating for international members, both politically, but also kind of trying to develop projects that will help in employment. So another topic I could talk for a very, very long time about. But if we focus first on the employment services and the move of the employment services to local level, as I said, Espoo has 47% about tertiary education, people with tertiary education. If we compare to, say, I grabbed Lahti as an example of somewhere else near the capital area, and it's 30%. So now that we have employment services at local level, we can cater the services to the local population. So Espoo has a much higher educated population than, or more likely to have that someone has a higher education than any other area in Finland. So these employment services can not just be this general blob that is treating everyone the same, and especially treating every immigrant the same. They can they have the time, they have the connections to the local companies, they have the knowledge of what's happening in the area right now. They can, for example, work together with Helsinki employment services, and this kind of activities that weren't possible earlier are now possible. Also, in terms of the data side of the employment services, collecting having high quality data on the unemployed people in the area. So, employment services is one side, but then to sort of answer the question you asked to Kelvin, there's the public sector. That is the cities are always going to have a difficult time telling private companies you need to hire more. There are things that maybe can be done, incentives for language learning, for example, giving incentives that if you hire this person and then let them do a couple of hours of Finnish learning per week, because it's more important someone is learning Finnish on the job instead of outside the job, then you'll get incentives to hire and let them do Finnish in their work hours. I'm not yet elected, so I don't know the feasibility of that, but that's as an example. But then in the public sector side, we can do so much more to lower language barriers. For example, the procurement processes that cities do, the buying of services, those require Finnish or Swedish in the procurement processes. And if you're a small immigrant-led entrepreneurship that is trying to compete, you can't compete if you're needing to, it's already difficult to compete if we don't take into account you're going to have to get someone to come in and do translation work for you or whatever. So, the public sector has a huge role to play in the unemployment, in lessening the unemployment.
Okay, very good. And then what does Nina say to this? Helsinki is a huge city compared to the others, of course.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Owen, for opening all your knowledge in this topic. I completely agree. And also that now the employment services have been transferred to the municipal level, I actually also think it's a huge plus for us and a huge possibility if it's done correctly. But of course, we need to make sure as politicians that actually happens. So now they have the possibility to actually look at the local issues in employment and what kind of backgrounds, languages people know, and start building from there, and with the companies making connections locally. So I really hope we have hope in these services now, but at the moment we need to realize that the Finnish government has made huge cutbacks, for example, in the culture sector, where many people, also non-natives, work and now have lost their jobs because of all the cuts. So I would link the growing unemployment more to the government cutbacks than the employment services. Yeah, there's a lot to do, and in the last budget negotiations in Helsinki, we were able to put more funds on the culture sector. We were not able to give as much money as was cut from Helsinki, but 2.5 million was put in the culture sector as funds. So there is hope in that, and in municipal level we can do more in that sense. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe we move on. All the three cities are growing, and for example, in Espoo, 85% of the population growth has been due to immigration. Should the integration services be improved somehow, or are they already working well in your city? And as I started with Espoo, maybe we start with Owen.
Yeah, because I never had to go through the integration services. People always asked every immigrant, and especially candidates, how were the integration services for you? And I never went through them because I was a student. And this is something that has luckily gotten better. But one key factor is that every migrant should have the option of going through the integration services, and not this and it's not kind of, you've come here as a student, you've come here for a job, you don't need to integrate, you're already settled here. And this is getting better, and I think it has gotten better in recent years, but there still needs to be continued development, getting feedback from the users, getting feedback from the migrants. This is where, for example, having some kind of representation in the city council comes in. And working for a trade union, I should especially mention how the free 6-month rule and other recent government changes have increased the risk of exploitation of migrant workers. So that everyone thinks of exploitation of migrant workers and they think of the berry pickers. And those are obviously one of the most drastic examples. But, it's someone who only has 3 months to stay in the country is offered a extremely exploitative job contract. They're not going to think it's quite an easy decision. So we need to make sure that, to try to minimize that as much as possible, that the integration services are really teaching about Finnish working culture, teaching about exploitation, teaching about trade unions, teaching the skills needed to sort of fend off the wolves, even if I hope that there won't be too many of them. But I think as times are getting harder for immigrants in this country in the next couple of years, still it will be. Hopefully next government less so. And finally, I want to mention that integration is a two-way thing. And we think of integration services as being services for the immigrant to learn about Finland. And I do think we need more, let's say, integration services for Finland to learn about immigrants. So things like putting money into diversity holidays and festivals and celebrations of foreign holidays, and all of that is doing activities that will help Finland integrate to international people in the same way that internationals can integrate to Finland.
So what about Kelvin? Was it the same for you as you came as a student, or?
Yeah, so I came over as a student, and what Owen describes sounds very familiar to me. I, as a student, was vaguely aware of things like International House and stuff like that, but I never did anything that I would call an integration service. Now, being in part of the university does get you some things, like it gets you sort of a leg up on creating a social group and things like that, but it's not the same. I probably would have benefited from some additional services to learn about things about how various things work, what healthcare looks like outside of the university, hospital, things like that, how to do your taxes, etc. Not that that's hard, but you still have to be told how. And the other thing I would add is this is another good place to address the language issue. Integration services should offer, as much as is possible, some sort of introductory Finnish and Swedish. And also, possibly one of the cheapest ways to accomplish that is also to create low barrier spaces to practice Finnish and Swedish, where people aren't going to suddenly switch to English because it took you a few seconds to find a word. That's one of the hardest parts of learning Finnish, I'll say, is just getting a chance to practice it with the person who just wants to get on with their day and speaks English better than you speak Finnish.
Okay. So what about integration in Helsinki? Does it work?
Thank you. Thanks for bringing all the topics up you mentioned. I think in Helsinki we could still do better in realizing that every immigrant is an individual person and recognizing what's their goal being in Finland. And also Owen mentioned skills. So what kind of skills they would need more to accomplish their dreams in Finland. So I really admire, for example, in Vantaa, they have this kind of trial where immigrant mothers can attend in schools to learn Finnish language. They can go to the same school, not the same class, but the same school with their own kids and be there in the classrooms. And that's the way for them to start learning Finnish and even for some learning to read, because they might not yet know how to read. So we need to realize everyone's individual level and what they need. And as I currently am in the Culture and Leisure Committee, there we have been trying to improve, for example, having more staff in the libraries in those areas where there is more immigrants, so they can introduce how libraries work in Finland, what kind of services they can get. Also, as Owen mentioned, different kind of events and happenings. Libraries are one key place where you can meet people, also integrate that way as you meet Finnish people, and Finnish people also can meet immigrants. Then one more thing is hobbies. We've been now raising the budget in especially those areas where more immigrants live. So to get also immigrant organizations to apply funds for having hobbies. And actually, one nice example is Somali Cup, which is a Somali football tournament in East Helsinki. And they now have learned how to apply funds from the Culture and Leisure Committee. And they now can organize that football tournament with cities funding, as they now know that that's possible. So those kind of examples. And immigrant girls are statistically the ones that are now having the least sense of belonging in Helsinki at the moment, and having the least, when they have been asked, do they feel like they have the power to influence issues in Helsinki, it's the immigrant girls who feel less that they can do so. So there is still many things to be improved. Thanks.
Thanks, Nina. Very good points. And my second question would have been in this field that it can be difficult for everyday citizens to know about everything going on in the city. And people need to know more, not just about the events happening, but of course all about things that like plans that are in progress and decisions that have been made. In Turku, we have noticed that even the city web pages are not available in English, or they haven't been updated in years, and they contain outdated or even false information. So how would you improve residents' access to information about important issues and involve them maybe more in decision making? And we could start with Nina, because you had such good thoughts about this.
Yeah, in addition, as you mentioned, the digital services, there's a lot to do, and not just like translating web pages, but for example, in the health services, I've been hearing about issues that you cannot decide on which language would you like your service to be, and some immigrants would like it to be Finnish, but they still keep getting letters in English even though they don't even know English, and just like those little things that make the world for someone. And then more of a wild idea, I've been dreaming about this Helsinki app where you could like check what's going on currently, and even like we could have there the upcoming decisions in Helsinki politics in many different languages, and people could like vote or like shadow vote what's their opinion on those topics. So that would be really cool because we know that for example, immigrants, they are less represented in the city council. So in that way, we could ask people's opinions on different topics via this app. But also having more panels where people are invited. There's, for example, in the parliament, there's the climate panel and other panels. So, for example, immigrant panel would be a really cool thing. When there are specific topics that we would need more knowledge on. Those are just a few ideas.
Okay, then moving on with Espoo and Owain.
I mean, as Nina was sort of saying at the end, it's a representation. It's about. I mean, when I joined Aalto and when I moved to Otaniemi, I was the only international student who was being active in the student union or student deal boards, and very quickly things became quite obviously better because I then point out that this website isn't being updated, and on the sort of very minor level, that though just having someone there who is a representative of the group encourages the mindset amongst the Finns who aren't members of that group to start thinking better on that. So I think now at Tech, I'm the only non-Finnish worker again, and there's just so many things that are so easy for me that I notice and like, I hadn't thought of it like that, and that filters down. Then concretely, how as well as just we need to elect more non-Finns or non-native Finns, is this kind of multicultural immigrant council. Helsinki has a version of it. Tampere has an immigrant council, though theirs requires you to speak Finnish in the council. Turku has the multicultural council, I think is the name. And Espoo needs some body that would be yearly, several years, electing representatives of the different types of migrant populations present in Espoo, and that would be a real voice for people. Also, then people would know oh, I've got a problem and I don't know where to send my problem, and that can just be an avenue for kind of this two-way communication and representation.
So what could we do in Turku better? What would you say, Kelvin?
Yeah.
Or do we need to do things better?
When I first heard the question, of course, my first response is, well, there's your digital services. Like, some of it is, I mean, in terms of to say things that haven't already been said, some of it is just throwing enough resources at the problem, to make sure that there is somebody around who can translate or write in English that information. Automated translation is not enough for anything of serious import. There has to be an actual native speaker, at very least proofreading, and ideally writing the English document themselves. Or maybe not necessarily a native speaker, but a fluent speaker. And to jump off of what Owain was getting at, having more immigrants in the process involved in decision making and but also at jobs that, like in public sector jobs, in basically everything that the city does, having people there who someone could just come over and tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, do you have a minute? Can you come and proofread this? Our English page is 10 years out of date. Could you maybe consider updating it? You speak both languages. You can read the Finnish version, but other people who need this page wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, that is true. We often just have two languages, and in Turku, it's usually limited to Swedish and Finnish, and then we forget English, or then if we add English, then we drop the Swedish. So it would be important to not let these languages go. But yes.
Yeah, definitely not drop the Swedish.
Yeah. So we only have like 1 minute left, if I'm right. So I think we need to start closing this off, and I want to thank you all very much for your opinions, and it's good to know that things are moving forward in all these 3 cities. And thank you to all our audience for your participation. And there is still time to vote in advance until tomorrow evening, the 8th of April. And then remember to vote at your own voting location if you leave it until Sunday the 13th, when we will finally then get the results, starting at 8 in the evening when the voting ends. It's going to be very exciting to see how everything will go. But thank you very much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.